The YouTube takes a second. Okay, so the first question is from Krishna Sevaka Prabhu. He says, it's kind of a long question. He says, please accept my humble obeisances, Guru Maharaj. I have been reading from your book, Circle of Friends. My understanding is that in the pratat-lila that occurred on this planet, as described, Krishna and Balaram do many things outside of Vrindavan in various Vaibhav Prakash expansions. But in Vrindavan, Balaram is the only Vaibhav Prakash expansion. Upon the return of Balaram to Vrindavan, after being away for some time, both Krishna and Radha asked him to satisfy certain gopis who have fallen in love with him, that is Balaram. It appears to me that Balaram does satisfy the gopis from a place of quote unquote seva to Krishna and Radha rather than out of Madhurya. It appears that Balaram can express Madhurya in relationship with those gopis, and that it is indeed part of his emotional quote unquote rasa combination, as well as neutrality that he expresses in Vrindavan in subtle ways like expanding himself as objects that Krishna uses. I imagine that if he can do all that in the pratat-lila, that he can also be that way in the aprakat-lila as Krishna desires. It seems that although Balaram is a Vaibhav expansion of Krishna, being his best friend, he is also our best friend here on earth by showing us how to let go of our separate self-centered desires by surrendering to Krishna's desire only. So my question is all this understanding in alignment with Shastra and our teachings? And can you elaborate?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, there may be an error in your thinking slightly, and that being that Balaram, first of all, we look at Balaram through the lens of our own sampradaya, and we find consistently from the founding acharyas and from Vrindavan Das Thakur, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami in their texts, Chaitanya Bhagavad and Chaitanya Charitamrita, respectively, that Balaram is constituted of sakhya rasa, and that sakhya rasa is combined together with a hint of vatsalya, being the older brother, and also dasya, and the dasya is more prominent in his constitution outside of Vrindavan, in Mathura and Dwarka, and obviously beyond that in expansions where he accompanies Vishnu as Seish. And so his romantic component, if you will, in his constitution is not something that is the focus of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. It is, and he doesn't have a romantic relationship with Krishna's gopis. When Balaram is sent by Krishna to Vrindavan to pacify the residents and assure them of his return, he ultimately meets with the gopis as well. And in the language there of the Bhagavatam, we find that he has respect for the gopis' Mahabhav. He bows to their Mahabhav that he witnesses. And we find this in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, when Nityananda Ram sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Rath Yatra, in his own vision, Nityananda Prabhu's vision, take the form of Radha, his dancing takes the form of Radha. Krishna says through the pen of Krishna's Kaviraj that Ami Shisha Guru Nata. In dancing, Nata, I'm the Sisha, and he goes on to say, and Radha's dancing is my guru. So in Rath Yatra, we know that his dancing was so, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so absorbed in the dancing that he entered into the mood of Radha in the vision of Jagannath Swami, who was startled and stopped the cart, wouldn't move. So witnessing this at a distance, and understanding what was taking place, Nityananda Prabhu paid the dandavats at a distance to Radharani. So we find this also when he speaks to the gopis on behalf of Krishna. They have great respect for him. It's expressed there as the older brother, and he has great awe and reverence or respect, let's say, it's a respect for their Mahabhav. And he is Sankarshan, which means to draw together. So he's drawing together, in this instance, by drawing Krishna to the scene, making himself so surrendered to Krishna to represent him that the gopis begin to feel Krishna's presence in Balaram. And some say that his complexion changed from whitish to sham at that time. But this doesn't mean that Balaram has a relationship with Krishna's gopis. He, on the other hand, has his own gopis who fell in love with him during the holy Lila in Braj. And that is who Krishna is telling him to tender to. Radha's asking him to tender to them. Nanda Maharaj agrees, and so forth. And so he, then the Ramgat Lila takes place where Balaram meets with those young gopis, and he drinks the Varuni beverage, he chastises the Jamuna, and so on and so forth. But these are different gopis, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura considers the relationship with these gopis to be Maryada. Maryada is another name for Vaidhi, Vaidhi Marg. So there's rather than Raganuga. And we don't have any person, any gopi, for example, in that group of Balaram's gopis who would stand as an example that we could follow, which is what Raganuga is about. Raganuga is about following the example of one of the associates of Krishna in Braj. So it's not a Rag Marg destination, if you will, to become a gopi of Balaram. But this is an aspect of Balaram that is very secondary, if you will, to the focus of the Gaudiya Sampradaya on Balaram, whose Ragmarg sentiments are all in relation to Krishna. He is the perfect example of love of Krishna in Sakhya Rasa. You can say the same about him in Vatsalya Rasa and Madhurya Rasa, that those all being part of his emotional composition. And at the same time that he's the perfect example of those ideals, he is also the object of love for Sakhya Rasa at the same time. So he is perfect ideal, and in that sense, the example of love, and he is the object of love as well. So we find in Krishna's coward pastimes that sometimes he's taking the role of the object of love for the coward boys more than he's taking the role of being the ideal friend and the personification of the love rather than the object of love. When Krishna goes, for example, to Radhakund with some of his Namasaka friends, the rest of the boys stay with Balaram. There, he very much takes the role of being the object of love. When they're together, that also happens, Krishna and Balaram, but there's more of a tendency then for them to see him, his friends, as the example, perfect example of love of Krishna in Sakhya Rasa. So, with regard to the Madhurya side of Balaram, well then, yes, he manifests as the bedstead of Krishna and other surrounding paraphernalia. In this way, he assists really in a dasya sensibility through those manifestations, the Madhurya Rasa of Balaram, just as of Krishna, just as Ananda Sesh is the couch on which Vishnu lies with Lakshmi. So it's not that Anantasesha has a romantic relationship with Krishna or with Lakshmi, for that matter. So there is a sect within some sector within Gaudiya Vaishnavism from the Bengal side that have tried to theologize such as to place Nityananda Prabhu prominently in Madhurya Rasa, but this is not supported by the Goswamis, by Krishnadas Kaviraj, Vrindavandas Thakur, and so forth. So we follow them. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Please, if you're there, Krishna Sevak, is it? You can reply. But I mean, I think this was maybe you missed this part from what I remember from hearing your question. The fact that Krishna Balaram has gopis of his own. He doesn't have a gopi bhav relationship with Krishna's gopis, and Krishna's relationship with his gopis is parakya. The relationship between Balaram and his gopis is swakya. Is married. He comes to Braj. Krishna asks him as he heads, by the way, those girls, that had a crush on you during Holi, you should, tender to them. He says, yeah. He doesn't take it too seriously. But when he finally meets with the gopis and pacifies them, Radharani is fully pacified as much as she can be in Krishna's absence, but more so through Balaram's representation of Krishna than, for example, Uddhava was earlier on. But she says, nonetheless, but there are these other gopis who are, that I've been waiting for you. And he goes, yeah, okay. If Nanda Maharaj, says so. So Nanda Maharaj then says, so after Krishna, Radha, Nanda Maharaj insistence, then he goes and has a Gandharva marriage with them. So his relationship with them is not parakya. He's not going out, stealing out every night to meet with them. So it's very, very different. And the Maryada side, of Balaram is not something that's the emphasis in our sampradaya. There are other sampradayas, other lineages who emphasize that side, and his relationship with Revati, who he married in Dwarka or Mathura, I think it was Dwarka, and so on. So, obviously he's a multifaceted person, but we should focus on the focus of the lens of the Goswamis on Balaram. So I don't know if you're present here, because that was read your question, you wrote it out. But if you are and you have further comment or haven't really addressed your question entirely, let us know.
He's not present here today. He couldn't make it, but I'm sure he'll come back with the follow-up or something. So the next question is from Uddhava from Spain.
I don't know the answer to that one.
Uddhava, can you hear me?
Hello?
Okay, I think let's see. I could probably unmute you here. Okay, there we go.
Can you hear me?
See.
I wanted to ask you, because one of the, I think a few months ago, there was an interview with Satyanarayan Das Babaji in the Namarasa podcast. And there he spoke about the siksa-guru, but he spoke about the siksa-guru in a very, how we say, that is, you can only have one, that your siksa-guru and diksa-guru, must be the same. And more or less, I understand, what he's trying to say, but would you elaborate more on the subject and how you view this issue and how, our acharyas and our line, will balance the issue of the siksa-guru?
Yeah, surely. Siksha-guru is a Gaudiya Vaishnava concept. You will not find this Siksha-guru concept anywhere else. When the Puranas mention the guru, for example, when the Bhagavad Gita mentions guru, for example, we don't find some differentiation between a diksha-guru and a siksha-guru. Siksha means instruction, so it's fairly obvious that any guru who we're going to take initiation from, we must have received siksha from, right? Instruction from, must have heard from him or her. So to divide these two, this is a device, if you will, that has arisen in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Now, the concept is emphasized to some extent in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the opening line of the text is Vande Gurun, Isha Bhaktan. I offer my respects to the Guru. Gurun is in the plural. It could be taken because the plural case is sometimes used for a reverence, and it could be speaking singularly at the same time. But Krishnadas Kaviraj doesn't use it in that way. He uses it as a plurality, and the plurality, if you will, of gurus that he plays out is the diksha-guru, siksha-guru concepts. And he says there that the guru and the siksha-guru are equal in their spiritual standing, but their functions are different. So the function of the diksha-guru, just if we just want to take away siksha and just leave diksha, diksha means the imparting of the mantra. And of course, that same diksha-guru, obviously, through his siksha or her siksha, we are captured and our faith is arrested and the mantras are imparted, and there'll be subsequent instructions and so forth. But that there may be persons in our spiritual life who serve as siksha-guru, although we've already been initiated. We don't receive the mantra from them, but we receive siksha from them, instruction. And it seems that this arose in the Gaudiya Sampradaya with an emphasis on a siksha-guru for the very reason that sometimes the diksha-guru proved to be, in some respects, lacking, but not to an extent that he or she should be disrespected or rejected. But the lacking, nonetheless, is made up for by way of a siksha-guru who has arguably greater standing in knowledge, in bhakti, capacity to inspire us and so forth. And so this was a way in which the guru institution, if you will, was preserved rather than throwing it out because somebody didn't measure up entirely to the ideal standards of what a guru means. You have to understand that we have gurus within the Varnashram system that are Brahmins, that aren't Siddha Purushas and so forth. And so when it came to the founding of the Sampradaya on the part of the Siddha Purushas, if you will, who are the Goswamis, their successors were largely householders. And it seems that the immediate successors of the Goswamis, for the most part, being householders, adopted the surname of Goswami. Maybe not as a way of saying, therefore, I'm a Goswami in the literal sense of the term. My senses are fully controlled, but we are the followers of Jiva Goswami. We're the followers of Rupa Goswami. We're the followers of Sanatana Goswami. So our name is Goswami. So you have these Goswami families, Jati Goswamis. So Jati Gosai. And can be a problem with that, but then in that group, there may be good representatives as well, in some instances. So, and we find that in the Sampradaya. But these householder disciples who took care of the deities of Govindaji and Madan Mohan and so forth, Radharamanji and so on, they formed certain, well, they gave shape and more form to what initiation involved and so on. And they developed different tilaks. It's not that Gadadhar put on a particular tilak and Nityananda Prabhu appeared from the spiritual world with another tilak and then waited with a different tilak. And so these ideas were developed by these Goswami families later on. It's not a bad thing, but they were like defining in greater detail through rules and regulations and form, giving shape to and institutionalizing the line, the lineage. They employed these kind of ideas. So that by the time it came down to, Bhakti Siddhanta, basically initiation was you got a letter, which was your Diksha Patra, and it said this on it, and you wore a certain tilak if you were in this lineage or that lineage, and so on, whatever, they developed in their particular lines that externally defined them. Meanwhile, you have a very smaller group of Gaurakisora Dasa Babajis or Jagannath Das Babaji, for example, type of Nirapikshas, renunciates, Siddhapurushas. They're giving Diksha, they don't do all these things. Gaurakisora didn't do that when he gave initiation to Bhakti Siddhanta. So in essence and substance, they conveyed what was required to be conveyed. They imparted what was required to be imparted, and so forth. So these are all relative. These type of measures. They're not necessarily bad things, but they're bad when they become thought of as you got to have it exactly like this, got to be done exactly like that, and so forth. So anyway, I'm going a little bit on a tangent, but what I'm speaking about is the whole phenomenon of Guru Tattva in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, how it's developed over the years, and so forth. These Goswami families were all Brahmins. Brahmins are typically the caste within the Varnashram that serves as the guru. So, when you're forming a sampradaya in that atmosphere of Varnashram world, social, religious norms and so forth, then who should be the gurus in Gaudiya Vaishnava? Well, they should be Brahmins, ideally. But of course, as the teaching goes on, not necessarily. They may be a fully qualified like Narottam Thakur and not be a Brahmin and be initiate widely. He was probably the first, to do that, and so forth. And there are many, many, many examples of that afterwards and so forth. So what I'm getting to add here is since forever in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there have been gurus who are very, very deeply realized and qualified. And then there have been gurus who are not as deeply realized and qualified, but they're capable of passing on the instructions. They set a good example, and so forth. And in some instances, well, that latter group may be lacking in some ways, and there could be problems. And there are early texts that attest to the fact that some of the gurus, it's not a new phenomenon that the gurus were lacking in some way. And the way, to get to your point, that this was compensated for in Gaudiya Vaishnavism was, rather than to dismiss those gurus, to accept a siksa-guru. Unless in extreme cases of the guru's departure from norms, standards, and so forth, it actually required rejecting him or her altogether, which that is also something that is addressed in the text, in Bhakti Sandarbha and other texts. But by and large, the attempt was to try to preserve that, and the siksa-guru was a way in which that could be preserved and the shortcoming could be made up for. We look at the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Well, his Diksha-guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami, I would say, did not have the same spiritual standing as Jagannath Das Babaji. And Jagannath Das Babaji was the siksa-guru of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, and we find things in Bhakti Vinod. We find things in Bhakti Vinod that weren't in Bipin Bihari Goswami. So Bhaktisiddhanta concludes he got it from Jagannath Das Babaji. So there's an emphasis there in that instance. Bhakti Vinod respected Bipin Bihari Goswami and throughout his life and so forth. But it's apparent from the history at a certain point, his shelter, more substantially, became Jagannath Das Babaji. So this is how it all developed in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Now the siksa-guru, I've said to you that in Chaitanya Charitamrita Krishna Das Kaviraj, it says they're of equal spiritual standing. Their function is different only. There's the real definition. However, the term siksa-guru has also over the centuries been diluted, if you will, or its meaning to be expanded into a more general sense, drawing on, for example, let's say the commentary of Jiva Goswami on the Bhagavatam, I believe it's 11th canto, where I forget the name, the sage says he has 24 different gurus. The river is my guru, the bee is the honeybee is my guru. They're all manifestations of the natural world, from the flora and the fauna and so forth. And Jiva Goswami says were his siksa-gurus. He learned from them. So there's a broad interpretation who gives siksha. So it was commonly thought, for example, in Gaudiya Math, after the passing of Bhaktisiddhanta, several devotees emerged as gurus, and they were qualified and successful. You had Madhav Maharaj, you had Sridhar Maharaj, you had Keshav Maharaj. This is before my Guru Maharaj started his mission and so forth. They all had disciples, and their disciples interacted. They considered, Bhan Maharaj is my siksa-guru, and Sridhar Maharaj is my siksa-guru, and Madhav Maharaj is my siksa-guru. Respectfully, in a broad sense. So another way of looking at it, kind of broad. Then there's the more specific sense, like it's discussed, mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that I addressed first. This is my siksa-guru. My substantial connection to the lineage lies here. And that guru teaches me more, instructs me, sets an example, inspires me, and so forth. But probably what Satyanarayana Das Babaji was talking about is the fact that, the more usual situation is that you have one guru. The guru is your diksa-guru, and he's your siksa-guru too, because you really can't be a diksa-guru without giving siksha. And so in the presence of the guru who is your diksa-guru, he's also your siksa-guru, and you probably would do well not to listen to this Babaji, that one, and that one, and pay attention to what your diksa-guru is saying. Then you won't have to have get confused because someone else is saying it a little different over here, and they teach it a little differently over there, and then your guru has to take the trouble to say, well, okay, we do it like this, and so on. So in times gone by, we didn't have an internet to listen to Satyanarayana Das Babaji over here, or this one over there, or that one over there. You lived in a village, you had a guru, and you listened to your guru, and he was your diksa-guru, and he was your siksa-guru, and boss, that's it. That's the normal situation. Probably Satyanarayana is talking, about that more. Now, it might be that in the absence of your diksa-guru who's fully qualified and so forth, after his passing from the world, or in his absence due to circumstances, my godbrother Chutananda Maharaj was in India and he was there alone. Prabhupada was in America for an extended period of time. He was feeling weak. He asked if there was any siksa-guru that he could, get guidance from in Prabhupada's absence. And Prabhupada said, yes, you can go to Sridhar Maharaj and Navadvip would speak of how you can benefit from him. I consider him my siksa-guru myself. So he went, he spent 6-8 months there in the math. So there are instances like that. But, that's more uncommon. The common thing, I think this is what Babaji was emphasizing, is probably the guru is your diksa-guru, he's your siksa-guru, and that's that. So does that help?
Yes, because I see a common phenomenon, for that, because different devotees have many siksa-gurus, so basically they pick and choose the siksa-guru that says whatever they like the most.
That means they have no guru. Many gurus means no guru. One guru means many gurus. If you have one real guru, then you have access to all the gurus and the parampara. But if you have many gurus, you have no guru. You have only your mind is the guru. So good. Yeah, so you have a good understanding.
Sajan has a follow-up on this one.
Okay.
Dandavats Maharaj.
Right.
You mentioned just now that the Grihastha Goswamis gave initiation in a particular way, and they even perhaps formalized or standardized it in a particular way, but that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura did not receive initiation from Srila Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji in that way. Is it actually known the way in which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta received initiation from Srila Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji?
Well, what we know is that he didn't receive a diksha patra. Patra means letter.
Right.
So you get this letter, and then the letter says you're initiated. This is your guru. This is his guru. This is his guru. His guru. His guru. And then, and besides the names of the gurus in succession, going back to Nityananda Prabhu or Advaita, they would also give the swarup of the guru's name. And Nityananda is so and so, and this one is, and so this is thought to be like, you got to have this letter. It's got to. This is very essential. Of course, it'd be pretty long. If you're in 5,000 years, well, that letter would be, a book of names. 10,000 years. So it's the practicality of that is obviously brought into question. So they were you would give it the tilak. This is your tilak. You have to wear this kind of tilak. You're in our party bar. Whatever these things, what we know from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura is that he said, "My guru told me your swarup will be realized in the syllables of the Hare Krishna mantra." That's what he told him. Instead of your swarup is this is how you'll walk and talk there, and this and that, and start doing that in your mind. He didn't do that. He said, you realize your swarup in the syllables of the Hare Krishna mantra. And so we find in Bhaktisiddhanta, as it was the case in Bhaktivedanta Thakur, very strong emphasis on Harinam.
Sure.
Once met with a godbrother of mine who left Prabhupada's line and went outside. He's known now as Gadadhar Pran. I met him once and we were talking, and I emphasized this point to him that everything will be realized by kirtan.
Yes.
He said maybe by lila kirtan. So I realized, well, he doesn't really understand the efficacy of the name in which the lila is found, and so forth. So you can't get around this point, and so that we know, and whatever else he receives between him and Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji. I often say, if you've got a complaint with Bhaktisiddhanta about what he received, in the name of initiation, you should address it to Gaurakisora first.
Right.
So the affection of Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura is very palpable and apparent in the testimony of Keshav Maharaj, who was once called, along with some other close persons, who to try to help get Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji Maharaj out of an outhouse that he had locked himself in, not to be bothered by anybody. And he was wailing out the names of Krishna. And so people tried to get him out for his own sake, and they couldn't get him out. And when Keshav Maharaj, who was initiated by Bhaktisiddhanta,
Right.
who Bhaktisiddhanta was initiating in the presence of Gaurakisora and in the presence of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, obviously with their blessings, when he heard, oh, it's the disciple of Gaurakisora, of Bhaktisiddhanta, then he opened the door.
Oh.
So that's just one instance. So the connection between Gaurakisora and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura is something that some people have tried to dismiss over the decades on the basis of nothing but hearsay. And as far as they know, where's the Diksha Patra? Well, he might even have it for all we know. Well, that's another thing. But it's a question of misconstruing details for principles.
Yeah, I had no idea that Srila Keshava Maharaj actually met Srila Gaurakisora Dasa Babaji. That's pretty interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Maharaj ki jai. Okay. Next question.
Okay, the next question is kind of a psychological one from Harinam Das from Virginia. He says, should we feel bad about having fear? Does that emotion hold us back from returning to Krishna? And is fear more detrimental to bhakti than other material emotions?
We should have fear of deviating from Krishna consciousness. We should have fear. Bhakti Prahlad Maharaj expresses fear in the Bhagavatam, fear of Maya, that the power of the illusory energy might distract me. And so I pray to Krishna that I have the strength to not to be distracted. So a healthy fear of bad association and circumstances and the power of material nature. That if I think I have no fear of material nature, well, she's pretty big and pretty darn powerful. We just go stand on the shore of the ocean and just what is an ocean in the vat of on Earth in terms of the vastness of material nature? It's galaxies, universes, gases and winds and whatever. And the ocean is just a small sample of that. And it is so powerful that you just, I mean, that's what it does to me. The ocean is like, wow, that thing is powerful. And so if you're not afraid of the ocean, well, you should have a little bit of fear what that thing can do to you. I'll go ride the wave. Well, the wave may have another idea what it wants to do with you. And I've had that experience myself. So I have great respect for the ocean and its waves and her waves, for example. So, we wear Tulsi neck beads to protect us so that even other common people will remind us of our commitment by asking, what are those nice beads on your neck? And then you got to go, oh yeah, well, right. And then you have to explain yourself and you have to think, so this is what it's supposed to do. The devotional attire, devotional sangha and so forth. So otherwise, you can be what to do, now, we may be on the precipice of a third world war, a nuclear blast, given the Russia and Ukraine situation and so forth. It's very a dangerous thing. Should we be afraid of nuclear war? Well, it was addressed to Sridhar Maharaj. He said, what did he say? World War III, let it be, or something like that. What can you do? You got to die. I remember we went on a walk. We went with. I was on one of many, but one of the walks with Prabhupada in Mayapur, and Prabhupada said, soon there may be war. He was reading the papers and seeing the situation with Pakistan and India, and he thought, this could break out, and they're both nuclear powers. And could be a problem. And so when he said, there's so many devotees, Prabhupada, what about this and that? And the whole walk was kind of about that. And we went out through the rice field and so forth as he would, and back around towards the Mayapur temple. And I remember Ramaswamy was saying, but and Prabhupada said, well, preaching will be good during the war. We'll distribute prasadam and so forth. And then Ramaswamy said something like, but Prabhupada, you don't understand. They have these nuclear weapons, and they have radiation. And he's going like on and on like this, explaining the danger of it and the fear of it and so forth. And Prabhupada said, he just kind of stopped and said, you have to die. That's going to happen some way or another. That's a given, so like, let's just move on here, and then just on to the temple we went, greeted by the Sankirtan. So I think we have to put, the dangers of life, if you will, and the thing that really is driving the fear of the jiva, the fear of not being, that's a reality. You're not going to be what you think you are, which is what you're not. This body-mind complex is not what you are. That is on death row. It's already been sentenced, and so, but you can get out. So that's the teaching. So I otherwise, you might be fearful of something that's going to happen to your children, or something happened to one of them, or your pet, or you have to put those things in perspective philosophically, as I'm doing here, and not let that emotion in that way get the best of you. But like is the case with all emotions, then there's a place for them in Krishna consciousness at the same time, and I've explained that. A healthy fear of the power of material nature to distract me from that by which I can transcend my present condition, which is overall a fearful one. This is the all-pervading issue, if you will, problem of material existence, fear. It is more pervasive than the sexual urge, and you probably know that that's pretty strong. The fear is even stronger. Fear. That's this world. So therefore, we should take shelter of Abhaya Charanadavinda. He at whose feet one becomes fearless.
Okay.
Another question?
I had a quick follow-up. So it seems like a lot of devotees nowadays have trouble kind of like ascertaining what is healthy fear and what goes too far. And so they like swing from one end of the pendulum to the other. So what is exactly like healthy fear of Maya for somebody who lives in the world but wants to be a serious devotee?
Well, I think that fear would be expressed by a consistent and regular commitment to the practice. It's a motivating factor. It's negative. It's a motivating factor at the same time. Now, fear, duty, these are not prospect. These are not motives that drive Raganuga Bhakti, but our Raganuga Bhakti is rather weak, ajata ruchi, not driven by the ruchi that characterizes Raga Bhakti. And so it's largely Vaidhi Bhakti with an ideal to attain, the Rag Marg in Braj Bhakti. But, fear is going to be there. Prospect is going to be there in the average devotee in terms of, I'm doing this because I will attain, it's my prospect, because scripture says it's the right thing to do, duty, fear, and so forth. So I think that, just as an aside, that's going to be there. But I think that, to answer your question, again, that the healthy way that fear would be expressed would be in applying oneself seriously and in a regulated way to those things that protect me from becoming distracted.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, the next question is from Madan Mohan from Brighton, UK.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. My question, it comes from a sentence in Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada's Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, but it's something I've also seen in sometimes in Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, I think maybe Krishna Samhita. So I'll just read the sentence in particular. He's speaking about rasa and kind of like rasa in a sense of progressions through rasas. So he says, in the fourth stage, called Vatsalya Rati, the fraternal affection evinced in the preceding stage develops into parental affection. And so obviously, generally the teaching isn't there's like a development, but rather that, like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, everyone's got a particular bhav, if you will. So I was just wondering if you had any insight why there's some cases, not in their overall teaching, but Prabhupada and Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, they kind of have this idea of kind of progression through the rasas, if you will.
I don't think they're really teaching that there, but what they're talking about it in a particular way in which it sounds like that. But what they're saying is exactly what Rupa Goswami says, that in Shantarasa, for example, there are two prominent features. And if we go to Dasyarasa, those two prominent features of Shantarasa are present in Dasyarasa, but something more is present. Then if we go to Sakhyarasa, those features that are present in Dasyarasa are present, and something more is. So there's a progression in that sense. And I think in one place Prabhupada wrote about it, I think he quoted Bhaktisiddhanta, and it sounds like you're going to develop Shantarasa, and then you're going to progress, and you're going to develop Dasyarasa, and then you're going to keep serving, and you can develop Sakhyarasa, then Madhurya Rasa, and so forth. But obviously, there is a wealth of teachings to the contrary in this regard, save and except for Shantarasa, which is a position that is not emphasized in Gaudiya Vaishnavism and is thought to be a rasa from which, through association, one could develop further by association with Dasya Bhaktas or Sakhya Bhaktas. A Shantarasa Bhakta could develop. We could look at maybe, and Shantarasa is a broad topic. There are different types of Shantarasa, different degrees of it, and so forth. We could, I think, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, even Jiva Goswami might even cite Sukadeva Goswami as an example of someone, and then he became developed, beyond that. So anyway, other than that possibility within Shantarasa, one who develops the defining emotion in Dasyarasa, the sthayi bhav. Sthayi means permanent, right? Fixed bhava. This is the bhava around which the other bhavas form, and together, the composite of these is what we call bhakti rasa. In this case, the bhakti. You have the dasya rati. There's the rati of dasya, which means the sthayi bhav of rasa. But until that bhav is developed through spiritual practice in higher stages, such that it's bundled together with the vibhav, anubhav, sanchari bhav, and so forth, then it's not dasya rasa. It's dasya rati. Dasya rati leads to dasya rasa. The dasya rati doesn't lead to vatsalya rati. Vatsalya rati doesn't lead to madhurya rati or sakhya rati, and so on and so forth. Therefore, they don't, those rasas don't change. They are the rasa itself is the development of the rati. Rati is another name for bhav. These terms have different meanings in different instances and so forth, just like English words do. But anyway, attaining bhava, that when that is churned, it turns into rasa. And bhava means here a sthayi bhav. So what's churned then is the sthayi bhav. The sthayi bhav is thought to be like an ocean. And from the ocean, water is evaporated, it turns into clouds, and then comes back down into the ocean in the form of rain, and it causes the ocean to swell. So when you develop a sthayi bhava for sakhya rasa, that's like the ocean. And then as it's cultured internally, some of the water of the ocean is evaporated into the clouds in this analogy, and the rain is the other bhavas coming down. Now you have all of them together, combining, assisting that particular sthayi bhava, causing the ocean to go to high tide, or for a tsunami of bhakti rasa, right? And so, where's the scope? You've attained bhakti rasa of sakhya. You are a cowherd boyfriend of Krishna. Are you going to turn into a mother of Krishna? Are you going to turn into a gopi of Krishna? Or no, that's not how it works. So I just think that, there's something to be said about writing, and something to be said about editing. There are different types of editing and so forth. Well, it's very useful to have an editor. Very useful. Different types of editors. An editor could say, Guru Maharaj, you said this over here, and over here, 500 pages later, you're saying it like this, and it sounds like they're contradictory. Maybe you could clear that up so that the readers won't be confused, because I know you aren't, but yeah, okay, I see that. Okay, this is how I meant to say it, and I'll say it better thanks to your help and so forth. So that's a modern phenomenon. And Prabhupada had editors. Before him, I don't think anybody had editors, right? But Prabhupada's editors were copy editors at best, not substantive editors. They didn't know, the subject well enough to be a substantive editor and say, Prabhupada said this over here, said this over here, or catch something. The Goswamis said this, you're saying it like this here. Someone could think you're saying it, differently than the Goswamis. I know you're not. So maybe you could, write that paragraph, that kind of a thing. Nobody had the familiarity with the tradition to give that kind of input to Prabhupada, but that's very useful. But now we, in our tradition, hopefully, we have that. I mean, that's part of writing in the modern world, which is a, effort to communicate, right? So this is going to be the case. You're going to go back through books of the Goswamis, and you're going to think, well, if he had an editor here, you could find in the works of Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, all of them, things where, maybe it could have been said a little better, because of course, they're writing for a particular audience at that time too. We're an audience, 500 years later. So anyway, I think that there are a couple plaches in Bhaktivinoda's book, and I can remember one paragraph in Prabhupada's commentary in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the fifth would have been maybe the 7th chapter of Adi-lila, when he's describing the internal associates, subject is Gadadhar Pandit. There's a purport like that, and Prabhupada citing Bhaktisiddhanta, and I think it sounds like that. But that's how they're not contradicting such a central point of the philosophy given by Rupa Goswami with regard to the permanence of a particular rasa upon attaining. Does that help?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Sajjan has a brief follow-up.
Maharaj, would Uddhava be an ideal example of someone within whom all the rasas of Shanta and Dasya and Sakhya be present in his relationship with Krishna?
Uddhava, his emotional spiritual composition is dasya rasa mixed with sakhya. Mixed with sakhya. And we find when he was sent to Braj, he became attracted to the gopis.
Right.
Now, this is an instance in which the sakhya in his composition was prominent. And he even reached what's called pranay in Braj, and the sakhya rasa is compatible, or Madhurya rasa is compatible with that. So in that situation, there may be devotee in a prominent rasa, a primary rasa, becomes attracted to another primary rasa manifested in another devotee, or as it manifests in Krishna. There are different ways in which it could happen. Those are two prominent ways. And then, because that's a compatible rasa, one's attraction to it, let's say you're in Sakhya rasa and you find it, you're attracted to Krishna's Madhurya rasa, how it affects him, then that Madhurya rasa becomes a kind of an assistant rasa to your Sakhya rasa, like adding honey to yogurt. Sakhya rasa is the yogurt, and you're attracted to a compatible rasa, and it has an influence of sweetening the Sakhya rasa, sweetening this up. It doesn't replace it. It doesn't. Right. Now, if you have an incompatible rasa, then it can cause it to
curdle.
Yeah, a curdle. To recede, something like that, to be diminished in its influence. So this is a complicated aspect of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the second to the last chapter of the whole book, I believe, mixing of rasas. Uddhava ki jai.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
What else?
Okay, the next question is from Anari Krishna from Poland.
Dandavats Maharaj to you and to devotees. My question is...
Can't hear you.
In the beginning.
Can't hear you.
And now, do you hear me? No?
Anari Krishna, I can hear you. Did you go to the English and click on English at the bottom?
May I read to you and you?
Yeah, we can do it like that.
In the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, as it is, Srila Prabhupada writes that the living entity is prone to control because this quality is present in Krishna. So is there Krishna conscious control, and how does it relate to Sharanagati when we are fully dependent on Krishna?
So Anari Krishna is saying in the beginning, I think it's an introduction to the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Prabhupada says that the living entities are prone to control or wanting to control because that's an aspect of Krishna. So he's asking if there's a Krishna conscious way of trying to control things.
Yes, you have to control your senses. Control your mind that wants to control everything and tell it that it's not in control. Humorous, of course, but I mean, you could use the controlling, tendency, if you will, let's say, in a missionary situation to manage a mission. You're a household, let's say, you have to manage your household and your children. You have to control your children, right? So you can control them, in a Krishna conscious direction, and so on and so forth. So there may be many ways in which that overall tendency can be applied in Krishna consciousness. But even primarily, you do have to control your own mind. That's a huge task right there, right? Control your senses. And again, your children, your pets, you can't function without controlling, right? You can't move in the world out of control. That wouldn't be Krishna conscious, right? So some measure of control is going to be part of a Krishna conscious life as well. But yeah, there is a neurotic, problem with having to control everything, keep everything under control, and that's a psychological issue that if anyone is suffering from that, or if others in your company are suffering from that, then there's ways in which I'm sure from a psychological point of view that can be toned down, dealt with, normalized, and so forth. So that's a brief answer. Hope it helps. Okay. Anything else?
Sorry, Guru Maharaj, I was muted. So Bhakta Craig has a question from Brighton.
Okay, you come from this one.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If Guru is captain of the ship and God brothers and God sisters are the crew, how important is it to kind of assess who the crew when we're choosing Guru?
Well, it depends, I think. For myself, obviously, I learned about Prabhupada through the service of his disciples, who were introducing him to the world as the vast, 99.9% of the devotees was the case. Some of them met him first before meeting any other devotee. But at the same time, and I was, in those days, I was inspired by their example. I thought, I want to understand, I wanted to become enlightened was my ideal. And I wanted a guru. And I felt these people were like serious. They were shaving their heads and wearing orange robes and stuff, and they were like, they're for real, that inspired me. But at the same time, when I took initiation from Prabhupada, or even before I did, when I was, I had joined about 3 months before I got initiated out in the mountains, and Prabhupada was in India at the time. And then when he came to Los Angeles, we went down there and initiated me. But anyway, at that time, in that period, I somehow I don't know why, but it just came to me, and I made a conviction like this, that even if everybody else leaves this, gives this up, I'm never giving this up. This is my conviction was based on not only the example of the devotees, and not only the example of Prabhupada, which I had little experience of. I hadn't met him yet, but it was from my own experience. I had my own experience practicing even before meeting Prabhupada that confirmed to me that I'm never giving this up. This is out of this world experience. Now, everybody may not have that. I kind of hit the ground, running, if you will. But I experienced, ecstatic symptoms before meeting Prabhupada. It wasn't outside of before knowing about Prabhupada, but knowing about him and following the practices that his own disciples taught, which he had taught to them, and accepting him as my guru, before I was initiated and so forth. It was my experience that caused me to I think come to that conclusion. I didn't have any reason to think like that necessarily. And many years later, the leader of the Los Angeles community amongst Prabhupada's disciples, who was a very good lecturer and a very sober type of a person, and he was the GVC. I was sent to Australia to teach the devotees, and from there, Prabhupada invited me to come to India. But while I was in Australia, that leader in Los Angeles, who I had been like grown up under, so to speak, for a couple of years at least, he left. What we call blooped at the time. He left the mission, and so he was an example of something that I had thought about. If everybody leaves, but here one person was leaving, and he was a very prominent person at the same time, and it was like, wow, I was like, whoa, that was like, how could he leave? But anyway, I was very grounded in my own practice and convictions, and I could understand, the philosophical points besides the very intricate theological points and the details of this, and so the very grounding, basic philosophical points. I mean, because he left, I didn't suddenly start to think maybe I am this body. That was just not not an issue. Maybe there isn't reincarnation. Maybe there isn't God. Maybe Prabhupada's not real. Those are just non-issues. That's not the kind of question that arose out of that. So I naturally thought about such things philosophically, and I thought, well, I guess, yeah, some people could leave, and I reasoned, philosophically why that might be the case, and so on and so forth. And as I went on in time, well, it happened more times, and there were many, 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 many disconcerting examples of devotees. I mean, there weren't. I can't say there were many. I mean, there were a number, but they didn't. The vast majority, wasn't like that. They were supportive and followers and so forth. Now, over time, after the departure of Prabhupada and so forth, well, many of my god brothers and god sisters haven't got good association, and they really need it, and they're not experiencing Krishna consciousness in the way that they were. I recognize that. I see that, and I see the state of Gaudiya Vaishnavism overall, and so forth. And it's very different, when I was young, 22 years old, and so forth. But so your situation is understandably a little different, and so on. But I think what I've said may be useful by way of an answer as well. I would say, in short, yes, to some extent, but it's also not a social club. I like this person, I like that one, so I'll join because it works for me socially. That's not going to work for you in the long run. Knowing people, in my experience, takes a long time to really know someone. To really know someone. But I mean, you have a favorable group of people who inspire you to, hear from their guru. I mean, we shouldn't definitely take a initiation from a guru because it's the thing to do in the group. That I like the people in the group; they're all doing it, so I'll do it too. That would be, a way to err in terms of what you're asking about. But the fact that they are an inspiration, would be certainly positive. But I think that was your question about accepting the guru and how much that should the group should?
Yeah, it's how much the god brothers, and you should let your god brothers and god sisters influence how you chose the guru, because obviously your god brothers and god sisters are going to be a reflection of the guru.
Yeah, to some extent, but but it has to be something. You have to make your own individual decision. It's an existential crisis. Just like adolescence is. Accepting a guru is something you have to do yourself. You have to think it out, and you have to be prepared that all the people that brought you to it, the person that taught you about it in the bar who was drunk, was a devotee. For example, I've seen things like that happen. Or the person who taught you about it later on may turn out not to be a good example, and you can't learn from him or her. You have to be prepared for that to happen too. So your faith of the guru should not be dependent upon that, but hopefully it will be supported by that, and that support will remain.
Thank you very much for your very insightful answer.
Okay, glad I could help. So I think we have some more questions, but we're a little over time already. So forgive me for being long-winded on some of the questions. We didn't get everybody's answered everybody's question today, but next week I'll be in North Carolina, and I think on Sunday there's the Vyasa Puja celebration the day before Gaur Purnima, and I think that would be broadcasted in place of this, and there will be questions and answer period in the evening as well. So hopefully, whatever they arrange out there, I'll be available again on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll be streaming at the same time.
Okay, hope to see you then. Jai. Gaur Premanande.
Very well. Shaguru Maharaj ki jai. So a quick announcement. Like Guru Maharaj mentioned, there's a Guru Maharaj is eavesdropping.
Here.
Oh, you're looking at who's there. I'll let you.
Haribol.
So there's 4 lectures are going to be streamed this coming weekend, starting on Friday 6:30 p.m. and Saturday 6 p.m. Then the Vyaspucha lecture is at 11:30 a.m. and then Monday there's the Gaur Purnim lecture at 4:30 p.m. They're all Eastern Standard Time. But as a warm-up act, we have our own Chitta Haridas talking about Brahma Samhita on Thursday for that Tattva Vivek class. So I hope you guys can tune in. And I'll also send this, the schedule for the streaming on the Sri Chaitanya Sangha Facebook page. So yeah, let's hope to see you all next week. Hope you have a